Good morning, everyone. Happy Monday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings. Hey, don't forget, July the 11th through the 13th, here in Ardmore, Oklahoma, Ardmore Convention Center, Preterist Pilgrim Weekend. Our theme is how we know we're not living in the last days. Look, I've been hearing from a lot of people lately who are literally frightened. You know, they say, "Oh, Donald Trump is the Antichrist. Oh my goodness, he's going to introduce a peace treaty, June the 2nd, 2019. We're in the time of the end." No, we are not in the time of the end. And Preterist Pilgrim Weekend this year, just like last year, which garnered tremendous amounts of interest and enthusiasm, this year is going to address this fundamental issue: how to know we are not living in the last days. Now, hey, it's this simple, folks. If we're not in the last days, the end is not near, and there is no end of the last days or the time we're living in. Only if you're living in the last days is there a coming end. But we are not living in the last days, therefore there is no end coming. It's that simple. Okay, I've been sharing with you the motif and the concept of the messianic woes, the messianic birth pains. The disciples asked Jesus, in response to his prediction of the fall of Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple, "Tell us, when shall these things be? What shall be the sign of your coming and the end of the age?" Among other things, Jesus told them there would be wars and rumors of wars. There would be earthquakes and famine, pestilence. Nation would rise against nation. He said, "They shall deliver you up to tribulation." Matthew 24:9. The parallel of that proves that this would be a time of Jewish persecution. Now, by the way, I've just got to make a point here. Our dispensational friends tell us that what Matthew chapter 24 is about the persecution of Israel during the tribulation period following the rapture. In other words, it's the persecution of Israel by the man of sin. No, that's not correct. In Mark chapter 13, this time of tribulation, and remember, folks, these tribulations were part of the birth pangs of Messiah. The birth pangs of Messiah would give birth to the coming of the Lord, the judgment, the resurrection, the kingdom. And Jesus said his first century disciples would experience that. Over the last several weeks, I've shared with you how the first century church was experiencing the very tribulation, the very persecution that Jesus foretold. Now look, if Jesus said those persecutions are the birth pangs of Messiah, and the birth pangs of Messiah would give birth to the resurrection, the judgment, the coming of the Lord, the kingdom, then that means that all of those things would occur in the first century. You don't have the birth pangs occurring 2,000 years ago without giving birth to the coming of the Lord, the judgment, the resurrection, and the kingdom. Remember what the Lord said. Isaiah chapter 66. "Will I bring to the time of birth and not bring forth? Shall I bring to the time of delivery and not bring forth?" It's a rhetorical question. No, he would not come, he would not bring to the time of delivery, i.e. the time of the birth pangs. He would not bring them to that time and not deliver. And the suggestion that we're living 2,000 years after those birth pangs, and yet the birth has not come, is really stretching it out. I mean, my goodness gracious, that's the longest longest birth pangs in the history of the world. So, once again, I've been sharing with you that in the New Testament, on the pages of Acts, on the pages of virtually every one of the epistles, we have the record of the fulfillment of Jesus' prediction that the birth pangs present. They were present in the first century. Now, I introduced a thought a moment ago that is really the point of today's video as we not really wrap up our concept of the Messianic woes, but we start shifting the focus. I made mention a moment ago that those persecutions that Jesus foretold were not for some far-off distant time, and the persecution of Israel at the hands of the man of sin. No, no, no. In Mark chapter 13, 9 and following, Jesus is very clear. They will deliver you. Who's he talking to? His apostles. His living, breathing apostles, and which by extrapolation means that generation. They shall deliver you up to kings and to governors. Now watch this. And to councils. And to synagogues. Well, the word council there is from the Greek word Sanhedroi. You know, any town that had a sufficient number of Jewish scholars, leading men, to create a quorum, could have a Sanhedrin. So you had all of these Sanhedrins throughout the entirety of the Roman Empire. And then you had the great Sanhedrin at Jerusalem. So Jesus said to his living, breathing apostles 2,000 years ago, and again, that meant that generation of the followers of Jesus would experience persecution at the hands of the Jews. It is not, please catch the power of this, it is not Israel being persecuted by some European man of sin. It is the followers of Jesus, i.e., Christians, being persecuted by Israel. Now, this is precisely what Paul said in 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, 14 to 16, when he talks about the church in Judea, as well as the church at Thessalonica, being persecuted by the Judeans, who, he said, had killed the prophets. They've slain Jesus. They're now killing the apostles and the prophets. You know, the apostles that were with Jesus there in Matthew 24, when Jesus predicted they're going to kill you. So here's Paul saying they're killing the apostles and prophets. They're filling up the measure of their sin, and judgment was just hanging over them, about to fall. This demonstrates the very first century fulfillment of the birth pangs. And to reiterate, since the birth pangs were in the first century, that means the coming of the Lord, the judgment, the resurrection, and the kingdom was to come in the first century. And you know what that means? That means you cannot divide Matthew chapter 24 and 25 into two subjects. You can't divide it into a discussion of AD 70 and then a discussion of some yet future coming of the Lord, judgment, resurrection, and the kingdom. No, there were not two periods of the birth pangs. There were not to be two periods of the persecution, i.e. the birth pangs, to give birth to the coming of the Lord, the judgment, and the resurrection. It is one period of persecution to fill up the measure of sin and the measure of suffering, and it would be experienced by the church at the hand of Israel. If you extrapolate the birth pangs into our future, then of necessity, of absolute necessity, you are saying that at some point of time in the future, Israel will begin persecuting the church. Folks, I'm sorry, it just doesn't work. Hey, listen, don't forget, this month's 2-book special, very, very special offering, Into All the World Then Comes the End, and Elijah has come. Go to my website, donkpreston.com, BibleProphecy.com, and right up at the very top, you'll see a banner giving you and showing you the price, which will save you over $10 over the regular price if you purchase them separately. Okay? Now, we're about to shift gears on tomorrow's program where Jesus continues his discussion of those birth pangs, and he said, many false prophets will arise and shall lead away the many. And because of persecution, many will turn away. We're going to be talking about the great apostasy. You don't want to miss it. I'll see you on the flip side.